that it's quite positive development that today in Africa we talk about civil society organization, because for a very long time people have been referring to civil society organization as non-governmental organization. So this kind of negative approach to social structure which comes from the UN, at least there is now a departure from that, and people are seeing in a more positive way civil society organization, and I'm glad about that evolution. The fact of the matter, though, is that civil society, in my view, has to refrain from kind of two things. One is to resist the temptation which exists among some of them to be simply cheap provider of services and to become instrumentalized by the donor community for them to be delivering goods at a cheap prices. Rather, at the most, I think that is one pitfall that has to be avoided, because if civil society is nothing but a conduit for delivering external aid, in my view, it is missing the point. The second pitfall that I think civil society has to try and avoid at all costs is to try and become a new power and be the kind of umbrella behind which a number of political activities are taking place. We have seen in a number of countries so-called independent candidate for presidential election, or candidates of civil society for presidential election, and so on and so forth. And we've seen civil society organization entering into this kind of partisan politics arena. I'm not saying that partisan politics should not take place, or that members of civil society organization do not have their views as to what is going on in the political arena. But in my view, the main role of civil society organization is not so much to be in power than to represent alternatives and different views and come up with alternative views regarding development issues or human rights issues and things like that. Coming up with ideas, new ideas, in my view, is very important. Now, what prevents civil society organization from being as effective as they could be in Africa? In my view, there are three elements. One, probably there is need to have a greater conceptualization of what is Africa, what is development, what are the challenges of African development. Because a lot of things are being said about Africa, about African development and things like that, but there are a lot of things which are still unclear, and there is need to refine the conceptual framework. And in my view, civil society organization can do a lot, drawing in particular on academic research, drawing a lot on policy research which has been carried out, and so on and so forth. Second, I think we still need to learn how do we communicate with broad constituencies in a context where there is a diversity or diversification of media, where there is a diversity of messages. How do we package the information that we have in such a way that people can feel empowered? How do we make sure that the information is a liberation tool? How do we package the information to achieve that goal? The third thing is we need, the civil society organization need to be probably more effective and more efficient in the kind of action they carry out. That means basically making better use of the financial resources, the human resources, the informational resources, the brand and the image that they have in order to keep empowering the people. Because ultimately, in my view, what civil society organization is all about, or should be all about, is about empowering the people, because there is a direct link, there is a correlation between poverty and powerlessness. People are poor not because they are not working or because they are lazy, but people are poor because they don't have the power to remove the structural barriers that prevent them from making use of their resources. So that is the challenge. How do you empower people, and what kind of action you need to carry out to empower the people?
Interestingly, civil society also have the same problem that, and are bringing out the same complaint that I hear at the G7, that donors are not willing to put resources into strengthening their capacity, into strengthening their institutions. And instead, I just putting money into programs, and they're programs that don't have foundations. And they therefore don't know what to do, and they feel stuck because they are looking for alternative resources, but that's very difficult in the philanthropic environment in Africa. In the donor world, in the Western world, it's fairly easy. What do you think civil society should do to answer the question that you raised today in the meeting, getting out of the cycle of dependency, when even for them to be effective with the community, they need institutional structures that in many cases donors are not willing to support?
Yes, I think it's a difficult question, and there is no straightforward answer or one size fits all. We need to have concrete analysis of concrete situation, and there is a great variety of situation. But what I would think as a matter of principle is that, first of all, let's make sure that we make all the use of all our resources. To have a kind of coordination among civil society organizations, you don't need that many resources. It is quite important. People can themselves make sure that they find innovative way of sharing information, disseminating information, and so on and so forth. And I think that for that you don't need to be looking for donors, for donor money. There are this kind of things can be done without donor money. I also think that being able to say no to a donor is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. It is true that sometimes donors that in a civil society organization need money, but most of the time the donors need the NGO, the CSOs. So it's all about capacity to bargain, capacity to deal, and to know what is your strength and where is it that you are weaknesses. So I think what is important is to break away from the mold and the tendency to rush to donors for everything, and to learn to make first use of our resources, and do not go to donors unless you can put on the table something saying, this is my contribution and I want to determine conditions of your intervention. I want to set the agenda. If you're not ready to set the agenda, if you are just jumping to grab whatever modality, whatever offer is on the table, we will be donor driven. So in order to move that, we have to know who do we want to be accountable to. A lot of CSOs today spend their time writing reports to meet the requirement of the donors, and they forget why they have got the resources. So they are accountable to the donors, but they are not accountable anymore to the people on behalf of whom they are raising the resources. So we need to come back to what is the fundamental mission of CSOs. Who do we want to be accountable to? If we are accountable to the people, then accountability cannot be only measured in terms of with the same yardstick than in the liberal economy. We need to ask ourselves, how are we accountable to the people? And enter into a dialogue with the donors as to how do we ensure that. And if we are not in agreement on that, then there is no partnership. And CSOs have to learn to say no when they are offered something which does not meet their ethical or political or otherwise standards.
Excellent.